What's going on with Trey Lathan? Does he have a chance of returning to KU? Plus, we're going to get to some transfer portal superlatives for the Kansas Jayhawks.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How's it going? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. And thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. Thank you also for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. On today's episode of the show, we're breaking down the latest with KU football and the transfer portal. What's going on with the Trey Lathan situation? Because I think it's becoming very, very interesting. And if Kansas even has a sliver of hope of bringing him back, that would be gigantic. We'll also get to some portal superlatives for KU. For instance, best offensive addition, most underrated player, categories like that here with Locked On Jayhawks. And then we'll finish up with some of the latest news going on. There's some interesting news going on in the world of college football and college basketball. We'll get to a little KU women's basketball update as well as part of that. So today's episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. So Trey Lathan is KU's stud linebacker that had a good amount of production. You're talking over 80 tackles on the season for Trey Lathan. He had the interception against West Virginia, put up tackles for loss numbers. I mean, he was just everywhere for KU. You look at the Pro Football Focus numbers, he was really strong. You look at how he compared to other Big 12 linebackers, and he was a top 10 linebacker this past year at KU. Had a really strong season for Kansas after transferring over from West Virginia. And I went as far in our episode before portal opened up, talking about the top 10 potential returners for KU football. I had him as the #1 player. Now, I kind of said that I thought you could argue a couple guys in that top spot, but for me, Trey Lathan was the top guy. And even if you think it was second or third or fourth or whatever, it still was a big deal that KU lost him. And obviously KU did a good job retaining a lot of these other players that they potentially could have lost or could have tested the portal, and they did a good job with that. And he was kind of the biggest one to go. Now, unfortunately, you could have made the argument that, again, he's the best player and you did lose him. That sucks, especially when you add into this that when you look at KU linebackers, think about the guys who have been for KU at the linebacker position. They've constantly had to filter guys in and out of the program, right? Like they've constantly had to bring in a ton of transfer additions to play linebacker snaps for them. And that was no different last year. That's no different this year with all the guys they brought in. But especially when you look at the guys who have been at KU and played the linebacker spot for multiple seasons in the system, which I guess it's a different system now with DK McDonald and Brian Borland, but it's still the same linebacker coach. Having that familiarity and continuity has been worth a lot for KU. Like you think of Rich Miller, he got a lot better from his first year playing to his second and even third. You look at JB Brown. JB Brown was a good player, but in a more of a specific role in 2023, played even more in 2024, and he was an all Big 12 level linebacker. That was his second year in the program. You think about some of the additions they made that didn't work out of guys coming in for just 1 year. Like Lorenzo McCaskill was like an all Sun Belt linebacker. He came in, that didn't really work out for KU. Eric Gilliard had some production at UCF. And I think his thing was he had some injury stuff going on, but like point being, he came in for 1 year. It didn't work out. Bengali Kamara came in and you saw some really good moments this year from Bengali Kamara. He had some really good highlights, some really good flash plays, made some important plays for KU's defense, but overall the inconsistency or the lack of consistency was there. Some of the Pro Football Focus grades didn't love it. The missed tackles, maybe missing an angle or doing something crazy that, it makes you wonder, like, do players take a big jump in the second year at the linebacker spot in the KU system? And so you look at Trey Lathan specifically, and he already was a really good linebacker this past season. And then you have the idea that he could potentially, potentially be a senior, potentially be another year in the program. And this is a former receiver in high school. This player who, in theory, hasn't been on the job as much as a linebacker, so the growth should be even more. All of those are reasons to believe that Trey Lathan not only is a good player now, but could be an even better player for KU if they can get him back for 2026. Now, this is a long-winded way of getting around to this, right? Because I'm basically talking up more and more on Trey Lathan, but he entered the transfer portal, or at least tweeted out that he was entering the transfer portal. And last I checked, that was still up on his social media page. So who knows exactly what's going on over there, right? But that was tweeted out by him. And right, so makes you kind of think it was going to happen. Well, to this point in time, he has not officially actually entered the transfer portal. Now, is this just something where he's going to wait till, later on the day, Thursday or Friday, to enter? Because again, Friday is your final day that you can enter. And maybe, I don't know what the reasoning would be that you would not officially enter or not until the last day. I don't understand what the purpose of that would necessarily be. But to this point, he hasn't officially entered. And then on top of it, because of that, he hasn't taken a visit, at least officially, to another school at this point in time. So it's kind of like that situation. What is going on here, right? I guess we're now on Trey Lathan watch as the portal closes, right? As this thing wraps up, if he does not enter the portal by the end of day Friday, or I don't know if there's a deadline on it on Friday or if it's just midnight Friday or whatever it is, whatever the deadline is on Friday when the portal closes here, if he is not officially in the portal, and I know it can take some time, so maybe we wouldn't find out till Saturday or Sunday potentially, but if he is not in the portal by the deadline, that means he is officially coming back to Kansas. And that would obviously be a huge deal for Kansas for all those reasons I just outlined and kind of talked about here, right? And it's kind of interesting, I don't know, I'd love to know, what was the reason he wanted to enter the portal in the first place, or why he tweeted it out, even though it hasn't officially happened. Is it that he wanted a bigger amount of money? Is it that another school came calling and said that, hey, we're willing to give you this amount of money to come here? Could the delay potentially be that another school wants him and they would pay him a big amount of money, but it's contingent on they're going after another linebacker target and Trey Lathan's their number 2 and this guy's their number 1. And they're like, hey, we'll give you that much money, but it's only if this guy doesn't do it. And they're waiting. I don't know. There's a lot of things that can add up here, right? Because if you're just talking about leaving from a playing time perspective, that wouldn't be it. So it could be a money thing. It could just be he wants to go to a program that, what if he has an opportunity to go play for a team that is expected to compete to win their conference or something next year, whereas he just played for a Kansas team that went 5-7 and he probably wants to, make it into the postseason, right? So there are a couple of reasons why it could happen, but obviously for Kansas, with the mass exodus of all the linebackers that they had, you wonder if once all those things happened, Joseph Sipp entered after Trey Lathan, was Kansas having to kind of hedge a little bit and be like, hey, John Kamara, we can't pay you because we got to afford Trey Lathan. And hey, this player, we can't because we want to pay. And then when Trey Lathan goes, it's like, okay, well, now we have all this extra money that we're planning on paying him. Okay, Joseph Sipp, are you coming back? And maybe Joseph Sipp is like, hey, now that Trey Lathan's gone, I want more money to stick around. And KU's like, no. So we'll just find somebody else in the portal. And then they end up entering, and KU makes some additions in the portal. And KU, makes a lot of them. Davion Crouch, obviously the most notable among the linebacker additions KU has made. And maybe you're at a point where you go, hey, we actually wound up with a little bit more money left over than we thought we were going to have. So, hey, Trey Lathan, I know you were thinking about entering the portal. What would you think if we could up that offer a little bit more? What would you think if we could match that other offer that you have, or whatever it ends up being? Again, I don't know that this is actually happening, but I'm just working this hypothetical out and talking with you guys, right? Then that becomes kind of interesting. So I find it very weird, but for a KU player that could potentially return and be one of KU's best players next season, I mean, I like what they've done in the linebacker portal. They've added some guys that have different skill sets. They've added some guys that can help with special teams. They've added some veterans. They've added some depth. They've added a frontline guy with Davion Crouch. But the difference in having Trey Lathan back to where you can start Lathan next to Crouch and linebacker core where it's Crouch and then you don't know who's going to be the other starter, and it's going to be a competition between some of those guys that maybe some of them I like better for depth than I do as a starter, is going to be pretty vast in how potentially I view this defense and how potentially I view this team. And you do have the opportunity, if you can bring Trey Lathan back, I do really like this defensive line for KU. If you can have Lathan and Crouch back, this would be the best front seven of the Lance Leipold era. And that is the opportunity you have in front of you. So we'll see what ends up happening here. It's going to be a very interesting, I guess, decision and story of what ends up coming out after this, of what ends up happening here for KU with Trey Lathan. Let's continue on some portal superlatives. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Thanks for joining us. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like the college basketball season. Tailgates, packed stadiums, being right there in the middle of it all. The energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever. But actually getting tickets, that part used to be frustrating. Not anymore. That's why Game Time gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. With Game Time, you can even pick a zone deal, right? If you're like, hey, I'm cool sitting wherever in this section, like I know I'm going to have a good seat no matter what. You pick the section, Game Time picks the seats for you, and you save even more money, right? That's a pretty good deal to me if you wind up in one of those situations, right? And knowing prices up front, including all the fees, that makes it so much better than when you're checking out and then you're like, wait, this is like double the price of what I expected. No. Toggle that on, and you can see all the price fees right when you're buying them. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets or college basketball tickets or NHL tickets or NBA tickets or comedy tickets, whatever you're looking to go to with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Thanks again for joining us here on Locked On Jayhawks. Don't forget you can check out the Everydayer Club to get the ad-free version of Locked On Jayhawks, and that is on all the major podcast apps. Plus, you get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server. You can hang out with us and chat with us each and every day. All right, portal superlatives that we have here. So let's start with this one. And if you have a different portal superlative that you want us to talk about that I didn't go over here, at @LO_Jayhawks on Twitter, give it a follow, just reply to us or tweet at us or DM us or whatever, at @LO_Jayhawks, and we'll go over that. Okay, portal superlative, your best offensive addition. To me, this is Nik McMillan, and this feels like kind of a home run slam dunk one right now. McMillan, I was just watching some of his Minnesota tape the other day, and that was one of his least productive games. It was early in the year. Like he took off over the last 6 games. So this was before that kind of happened, but I still saw some things that I liked against a Power 4 opponent in Minnesota in that one. I thought the stop-start was really good. I thought his ability to kind of get off press coverage was pretty good in that matchup. He ended up with, I think, 2 catches for 20 yards, and one of the catches was like really good at the sideline for Nik McMillan, but he went off at the end of the season. And I just love how much of a complete receiver he is. You can use him in the short where you're active. You can use him in the intermediate. You can use him deep. I think he's going to be the most complete receiver that KU has had, maybe of the Leipold era. Like maybe you would look at Kwamie Lassiter, how he took off at the end of his season at Kansas. Maybe you would look at like LJ Arnold in 2023 for Kansas, but I think McMillan is going to put up a really productive season for KU. Obviously, who the quarterback is and how much they run him and how much they pass are going to factor into those things as well. Best defensive addition for KU. This one was tougher for me. I'm between 3 guys. Eamon Smalls, Tre'von McAlpine, and Corey Gordon. So Smalls and McAlpine are both defensive tackles. Both can come in and play the nose tackle for you. They can play kind of more of a traditional defensive tackle in a 4-3 role. They can do some different things, and they are big bodies that, look the part of their size. It's not just, you were listed at 300 by your college team, but really you're 280. It's like, no, those dudes are listed at like 305, 310, and they look every part of it in the best way possible. Both of them are going to help the KU linebackers. Both of them are going to help, stop the running game. And I think both are fantastic additions. I think Smalls showed even more disruption at UAB, whereas McAlpine showed even more probably just stoutness at the point of attack against, taking on blockers in the running game. I think both are going to be huge additions for KU. And then I really like the Corey Gordon one. I think he's just a solid player. I talked to a friend of mine who covers things in the Louisville area, and he just told me, he's just a solid player. Like he's not going to necessarily be somebody who maybe you view as the star of the defense, but he's somebody who's just going to make solid plays consistently for you. But I look at it from the point of positional need for KU after losing a lot of safeties and after having a lot of struggles last year. I will take solid in a heartbeat. So I'm going to actually go Corey Gordon on this one, knowing that, hey, if you didn't have Eamon Smalls, you'd still have Tre'von McAlpine and a lot of these other D tackles like Blake Harrell. If you didn't have Tre'von McAlpine, you'd still have Eamon Smalls and a lot of these other D tackles. Because of positional scarcity, we'll go with Corey Gordon as the answer there for now. Most likely to be all Big 12. So this is a little bit of a different answer because, I don't know. There's a little bit of the Kansas scheme and production and stuff that kind of factors into this. Like it's maybe tough for a guy like McAlpine to be on the All Big 12 team for Kansas because he's more of a run-stopping defensive tackle who maybe isn't going to rack up a ton of tackles, but he's going to make everybody else's lives easier. And that doesn't always show up on the all-conference team, albeit he did end up on the All-American conference team, but he was on the team who won the league, so it becomes a little easier there. I think it'd be interesting. Like KU's had a lot of success developing guards. And so what if Connor Stroh takes off, the transfer from Texas? That could absolutely happen. But, I could see McAlpine or Smalls even saying all that stuff. I think McMillan for offense would be kind of an interesting answer there. Like, again, if he takes off and has 800, 900 yards, that would be something that probably gets him on at least one of the teams. Maybe one of the two running backs for Kansas, right? If one of the two running backs kind of takes off and ends up being like 1,000-yard back, then they could absolutely get in there. But I guess my answer would be, once again, Nik McMillan there. Best long-term piece for KU. So we defined this as you have to have potential to play 3 or more years for Kansas. And, at the end of the day, this is probably like, will this end up mattering? Like, I don't know, somebody who is supposed to be around 3+ years could transfer, but it's Kevin Oatis for defense, and it's Jalen Dupree for the offense. So Dupree could have 3 more years. The more I dig into Jalen Dupree, I'm kind of wondering if he's going to end up being like the guy for KU at running back. I don't know. We'll wait and see. Maybe I'm overdoing it there. But you look at Kevin Oatis, and Oatis is a former 4-star recruit who went to Arkansas, developed for a year. I think it wouldn't surprise me if he gets into the rotation this year as the defensive tackles, and then potentially could take off down the road for Kansas, especially with the way that Jim Panagos has developed players at that position. Most underrated addition for Kansas, I got 3 guys that came to mind. Dupree is somebody that I wanted to bring up here. Quincy Davis, really good Pro Football Focus grades and some certain traits that I like from him coming over from New Mexico State with really good at tackling, had a really good missed tackle rate, had some solid coverage numbers in terms of being used as a linebacker. The question for him is just going to be the jump up in competition. But the answer I'm going to go with here is Keyshawn Cummings-Coleman. Comes over from Iowa State, where he played a bit as a redshirt freshman until he got injured. I think he's going to be somebody who comes in right away. And honestly, he could have been one of my answers for best long-term piece because he comes in with 3+ years. He's somebody who I think is going to be able to play multiple safety positions for KU. That seems like kind of a theme that they brought in, safeties who can play some of the different positions. And I think this kid's going to be somebody to watch, not just in the future, but right now for Kansas. KU's best portal haul by position. I think defensive tackle has to be the one. McAlpine and Smalls have been talked about by me in a lot of these different position categories, right? And then on top of it, you added 2 others. You added Jabril Conde, who is kind of a potential home run swing as a D2 transfer who has some flash. And then you're making that long-term addition of Kevin Oatis, who might even be in the rotation as soon as this year. So that's a really good haul from the D tackle room, both for the right now and the future. I would throw this one in there as an honorable mention. It's not on the same level as the D tackle to me, but receiver would at least get an honorable mention for me because it's small but mighty. Small because you only have 2 additions, but I really like both additions for KU. I've talked a lot about Nik McMillan, but I also really like the Najee Cox addition. That's a big body receiver who's going to play a specific role very well for KU. He makes contested catches. He's a bigger body guy. You can use him downfield. I think that was also kind of an underrated addition for KU. So I really liked what they did at the receiver position. Now, position that I maybe still left wanting a little bit more, I might throw tight end in there. I haven't dug into the film just yet on the transfer in from Albany, just more so the stats on him. So maybe that'll change things a little bit for me. But I really wanted them to go out and get like an alpha tight end, a bigger spend at tight end. So we'll wait and see kind of on that one. I thought about putting running back in here just from a standpoint of, I've kind of said all along, like I would love for them to make a explosive running back, a really fast addition to kind of pair with some of their other guys. But I do like the 2 running backs they added. So I don't know where I'd put that one. I think to a lesser degree, offensive line, like I like the addition of Connor Stroh. I like the addition of getting an experienced left tackle and Nick Morrow. I like the addition of, bringing in a long-term guy that you're coming over from Wayne State and Tre'von Jenkins. And I like bringing on somebody who can play the center for you. But I really thought that they should have I wanted them to have in the portal the same way they attacked, where they got like studs and probably paid up for them. That's how I wanted them to do it with offensive line. And it felt like that, Stroh probably was a pretty penny, but I don't know. It felt like a little bit of like, I wanted them to get like a solidified stud at tackle, even if it meant, okay, maybe you got like, one less good piece at a skill position or something like that. And so I think the offensive line, like this will be an interesting year for Daryl Okpalsa, right? You got some interesting pieces like Amir Herring's good. You've got a guy in Tavaki Tuika-Lovato who is interesting and spent some unique snaps, but it's not a home run that this ends up being a good offensive line for KU. I do think that it'll end up being solid, but I would say there. And then if Lathan doesn't return at linebacker, that would be the other one I'd throw up there. If he does, then I like the linebacker room a lot. So that one kind of teeters there. All right, some of the latest news. We'll get to that next. Thanks for joining us here on Locked On Jayhawks, making us your first listen every day. You can check out Locked On College Football or Locked On College Basketball for your second listen, or for your second or third listen as well. Okay, this is some news from Chris Vanini. The NCAA Division I cabinet has moved the start of college basketball transfer portal to the day after national championship games. It was previously opening in March during the NCAA tournament. I love this. It's going to be a 15-day window. So instead of us having which I don't actually love this. I actually liked that our offseason kind of stretched a month or two so we could kind of breathe and digest and really deep dive into a lot of the different targets or potential targets for KU. I kind of like that, but it's going to be wacky and wild for basketball, just like it is for football with the 15-day period. There's some rules in there about like new coaches and stuff like that. Also, mid-year transfers not eligible to compete in the second school during that same year. So that's kind of a good clarification there. But this becomes interesting because even though it'll open the day after the NCAA championship, like we know now, even in football, like these agents and through back channels, like they're going to be talking during the NCAA tournament. So maybe there won't be like visits and stuff, but like people are going to have stuff lined up. So, but this becomes to me even more prevalent of like an idea that it would be nice if KU had a GM to be working on these communications like KU football has, as opposed to when the coach is just focusing on the NCAA tournament, but that's neither here nor there. Other news is this is from the UFL, which I think they just redrafted all the players. So the Louisville team, the Louisville Kings, has Kwamie Lassiter and Jason Bean on the team. So that's really cool. So I think there's going to be a lot of Jayhawk fans in spring football, maybe paying attention a little bit to the Louisville Kings there. So cool stuff there. Also, the FBS head coaches in football voted unanimously to expand redshirt limits from 4 games to 9 games. So it's not passed yet. That has to go in front of the D1 committee now. That seems wild to me. 9 games for a red. I mean, at this point, like you're basically just saying, okay, everybody's going to have a 5th year. You just have to play 9. That's crazy. Anyway, then you have women's basketball update here. KU women's basketball. Things are not going super well right now. They are 1-4 at the start of Big 12 play. They've lost some close ones in there. And now they've got versus Oklahoma State, top 40 team on Torvik. They've got at Arizona State, who's a top 40 team on Torvik. And then the schedule lightens up a little bit. They've got Arizona, who's 132nd on Torvik, Kansas State, who's 68th. They do have TCU, who's a top 10 team. But then the next 3 games are against teams outside of the top 40, one outside of the top 100. Then it's another top 30 opponent. And then it's teams 188, 68, 26, and 35 to finish. Right now, Bart Torvik is projecting KU women's hoops to finish 17-13, 7-11 Big 12 play. That to me would feel a little bit disappointing given the talent on this roster. I know they've had to deal with some different injuries with Samaya Nichols and Jalea Davis and stuff like that. And obviously the Reagan Williams getting hurt and stuff. That has not helped here, but like, I think the idea for me was, could you at least be an NCAA tournament team this year? And they've still got time to turn it around and figure it out and try to get a little healthier and stuff here, but trending in the wrong direction at this point in time. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the show. See you tomorrow. We'll do a KU Baylor preview right here on LOJ.